So if someone dies without an estate plan, it's called intestacy. And who gets things then? Where does everything go? And really, the state of California has laid it all out in the probate code. And there are different rules for distribution depending on whether the property is characterized as community property or separate property.
Right. So because of those different rules, we can have results that people didn't contemplate, that if they had taken the time to do planning, they probably would have done differently. The basic rule is if you die intestate and you have community property, your surviving spouse gets the community property.
Right.
If you die intestate and you have separate property, your surviving spouse may get the separate property, but not if you have children who survive you. Then they are going to get a share of your separate property. And if you have a deceased child, but a grandchild, same thing. The complexity, the challenge is that if you die intestate, your spouse may not inherit all of the separate property. And that's oftentimes not what people would have wanted.
Right. In either direction. Sometimes they wouldn't want the spouse to have gotten anything. They wanted this family money to go just straight down to their children.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And if it's one child, if the decedent had one child, the surviving spouse would get 50% and the child would get 50%. And if the decedent had two children, the surviving spouse gets a third, and 2/3 is split equally amongst the children or issue of a predeceased child.
Right. And that's the split no matter how many children if the decedent had 7 children, it's still 1/3, 2/3. But, the point being the children are going to get some, the spouse is going to get some. Maybe that's what you wanted. Maybe it's really not. I think it's probably almost never what they want. You either want your spouse to get it or you want your kids to get it. Very rare does someone say, I think I want my kids to get 2/3, my spouse to get 1/3.
Exactly. Well, and then there's the whole, because they didn't do an estate plan, how do you make these transfers and distributions? That's a whole nother layer as well. If it's just community property, or if everything was going to the surviving spouse, there's a spousal property petition.
Right.
But if there's that component going to the children that's separate property, that's going to require a probate.
You're going to have to do a probate. Yeah. Because it's not a spouse. Yeah. So that's yet another reason to not do that, not die intestate, especially if you've got separate property.